we are talking about resumes, cover letters, and reference pages. And we're going to talk about how to write them, how to structure them. And this is critical to this course. Your resume, cover letter, and reference page project and submission is one of your biggest assignments in this course, and I will tell you right now, it is where most of my students lose most of their points. So if I were you, this is the most important lecture to pay attention to, take some notes, and really make sure you understand the material. So jumping into it, we're going to cover a few things, but I wanted to give you some tips for success. So you can view sample resumes, cover letters, and reference pages in Canvas as well as in your packet. So in your resume packet, you will also have all of the details that I'll share with you today. But I'm going to walk you through exactly how I built my resume and how I've looked at resumes and reviewed resumes. I was a hiring manager for 2.5 years and hired many people in roles before that. So I'll tell you what hiring managers are looking for. So take some notes. Make sure that this is clear to you. You understand. If you need to review, go ahead and do it. If I'm speaking too slow for you, you can always click the gear on the bottom of this video and speed it up a little bit as well. Last but not least, make sure you get started on your resume, cover letter, and reference page. This is a major assignment. I know it seems super easy, but as we get into it, you're going to want to put a lot of time and effort into these pieces of paper. Reason being, once you build your resume, cover letter, and reference page, you never have to do it again. Now, I will be careful with saying that because there are going to be times where you need to rework your resume or maybe you don't like the format that it's in. But the reality is your experience is your experience. And so you can take these bullet points that you work so hard on for your resume, put them directly into LinkedIn, and you can have really, really clear and an effective resume that will get you the job. So let's start with the resume. Let's talk about do's and don'ts. So on page 3 of your packet, there's some information for you to review there. The reality is hiring managers spend less than 30 seconds on the resumes they are reviewing. I will pause there and let that sink in. Somebody is picking up this piece of paper, scanning it at a very high level, and then either deciding if they're going to put it in their pile to evaluate further, or they're going to just toss your resume out and decide you're not a good fit for the role. So you have 30 seconds to make an impression on a hiring manager. Your resume needs to be polished. There can't be any typing errors, no spelling errors. A resume can't be too long. You need to make sure that you stand out in a pile of hundreds of resumes. I'll give you an example. When I was hiring for the last role, it was an entry-level sales role here in San Diego. We had 350 applicants for 2 open spots. And you can imagine with 350 applicants, that's a lot of resumes to review. So it'll take somebody, typically in the business world, it'll be somebody on the recruiting side, which falls typically under HR. And then it will probably be a hiring manager themselves. So in this case, it was me as the sales manager that was looking at resumes because I wanted to make sure I didn't miss anybody that was great. And things that helped a resume stand out were creative uses of color, a great format, clear examples of how they provided value to the business. So I'm going to walk you through today exactly how you can put that into your resume. I also want to be very clear about this. So please, 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 I'm going to say it 10 times in today's lecture, but also I'm going to write it on half of the pages in Canvas. Your resume should be no longer than 1 page. I have been in the corporate world for over 10 years, and my resume is still only 1 page. Technically, the golden rule is that you get 1 page for every 10 years of experience you have in the business world. Now, I will caveat that by saying each page needs to be a very full page. So the reason I have not gone to 2 pages in my personal resume is because I can't fill a full second page. It would take a lot of filler, and I don't think that my resume would stand out if it was multiple pages. I truly believe that if you have a resume that is longer than 1 page, the odds of it going into the toss-out pile are much, much higher. So please, for this assignment, I will not even look at resumes that are longer than 1 page. You have to stick to the 1 page. Your page should be full, as I mentioned. It should be very easy to read and eye-catching. Paragraph format, while it is an option, and you will see it in your packet as an example on some of the resumes, it's not easy to read. Put yourself in the reviewer's shoes. If you have 30 seconds, a bullet format is much easier to read than a paragraph format. So keep that in mind as you go through this. Your resume, cover letter, and reference page should all be on nice paper. So this is quality paper. And I know you say, hey, wait, paper, I'm applying electronically. I might be interviewing electronically. Amazing. If you are interviewing and applying electronically, then instead of nice paper, you need to submit your resume, cover letter, and reference page as a PDF. Do not submit a Word document. That is the number one red flag I used to have when I would review resumes. If it came in as a Word document, I almost would immediately throw it out. PDFs ensure that the formatting stays the same, and it shows that you truly know how to convert a document from a Word document to a PDF. So I think that that also is telling of your computer skills. So if you are going in person at all, you should print out your resume, cover letter, and reference page. I have a clear example of a time that I interviewed with a CRO, a Chief Revenue Officer, one of the highest titles in the company. And I went in for my interview and he said, can I have a copy of your resume? And I said, I apologize. I don't have a copy of my resume. I thought that when I had submitted it in the packet, that was good enough. I have it electronically if you want me to share it with you that way. And he told me that he asks in every single interview for a paper copy of someone's resume to see if they've brought it and they're prepared. So you never know when someone's going to ask. If you're meeting people in person, always have a copy of your resume. Okay, so not all resumes are going to be identical, but there are basic rules of thumb that need to be followed that we're going to cover today. So the first place I wanted to start was to level set, and in page 4 and 5 of your resume packet, you'll start to see some things you're good at or an opportunity for you to fill out things you're good at, your accomplishments. This is a starting point for you. So as you're kind of workshopping and writing down things that you want to highlight in those 2 pages, get to page 6, and it's going to start talking about 3 different types of resumes: chronological, functional, and combination. Chronological is by far the most widely used in the business world. I want to be very clear about this. There are very, very, very few instances where you should not be using a chronological resume. Spoiler alert, your midterm does have a question about the types of resumes on it. While you do have to answer the question in an education setting here, I want you to know that if I were you and I was applying for any sort of a role in the business world, I would always be using a chronological resume. And I'll tell you why. Because with a chronological resume, you are organizing your experience in chronological order. So you're doing reverse chronological order, putting your most recent work experience at the top to your oldest work experience. And sometimes students will say to me, hey, I had a job as a busser, or I had a job as a waiter or a receptionist, or I worked at a daycare. Those are not things I want to put on my resume. And my response to them every time is, there is never an experience I think you should exclude from your resume. Reason being, I think there's always a way to spin your experience to highlight skills that you've learned that are going to help you in the role you're applying for. And I'll show you an example of this as we move forward. But just think, there is no job small enough. You want to show that you've held a job. You want to show that you're responsible and that a company trusted you and you worked there for a while. So no skill and no role is small enough or unimportant. Make sure you include it if you have the space. Obviously, if you're fluctuating on that 1 page mark, pick what's most relevant, pick the jobs you've had the longest, pick the jobs you've had most recently. So that's kind of where you'll start to prioritize. Functional resumes are typically for people who have 0 work experience. This is where you'd organize by skills. And then a combination resume is, just like it says, a combination of both the functional and the chronological resumes. And this is typically for folks who are switching career fields. So this is commonly for somebody who is in biotech, but now they're moving into real estate. They have a skill section at the top and then their work experience at the bottom. Now, I will say again, I am going to show you my resume when I was moving from the event world into the tech space and how I combated that with my resume. And I still used a chronological resume. So again, I find very, very little reason for you to not use a chronological resume. I want to make that clear. Okay. So moving forward, we're now getting to page 7 in your packet, and we're going to talk about how to organize a heading. And this is really important. Consistent branding is very, very important. It shows you have attention to detail. It may show for some of you who are applying for a more creative role, your creativity. So if you are thinking about a role in the marketing space, the event space, audio, visual, anything that's creative, you must really think about how to make your resume reflect your creativity. So whether that's color or organization or structure, make sure you're showing that. I was kind of on the bubble here where I was coming from event roles, going into the technology space. So I wanted to have a little bit of flair, but not too much. So I had this blue color. And that's a great point to mention, that if you're going to use color, make sure you use a dark color. Subtle colors are always better. Blues, greens, dark reds. Those always are just a little bit more easy to read, especially on a computer if you're submitting electronically. And the bottom of page 7 in your packet will show you how you can make your headings stand out. But one thing you want to keep in mind is that it needs to be consistent. I said this on a few slides ago, but your heading is going to be used on your resume, your cover letter, and your reference page. So you will include your phone number, your email address, your LinkedIn link. In this situation, I included my website because I had some work on my website that I wanted them to see. And then as far as your location, the traditional response is that you should put your address on your resume. Now we are in 2023 and the world has changed so much since COVID. So that can also mean you can put your location as far as the city and state that you're in, or just even the state that you're in. This is optional. You do not need to have it on your resume, but I will tell you that it helps if you are trying to move, or it also helps if you are local to an area and you're applying for a job local to the area. It may give you a little bit of a benefit for them to know you're local, you're available, and you can get plugged into the company really quickly and easily. I will call something out there. You'll notice my location on this resume says San Francisco. I put my location as San Francisco because I was moving regardless of a job. So I didn't want these companies that I was applying with to think that I needed a job and they needed to relocate me. I was already going to be there. So I put my location there to utilize that tip I just told you, as far as maybe I'm local, convenient, and easy to start relatively soon. So then you're going to get into your sections. You'll see here I have my education section, my leadership and involvement, and my experience section. You will also see as we progress, I'm going to show you kind of iterations of my resume here. Education goes at the top if you are still in school or if you are a recent graduate. So you always need to have education at the top. A date for your education is optional. Traditional folks will say you should have a date on it. I did not include a date on this resume because I actually wanted to kind of promote myself as somebody who had more experience. I worked through school, so I wanted to, be able to talk about that in an interview. But for you all, please include the date for your education. I'll show you that on another resume example. And then feel free to combine sections. So you do not want to have just one bullet in each section. So I combine leadership and involvement, and I put volunteer work as well as leadership positions that I had on the same section so that I could have more than just one bullet there. So think about combining things to work for you and in your favor. If you do not have a leadership and involvement thing to highlight or experience to highlight, you could do activities, you could do volunteer experience, honors, anything that can help highlight who you are and what you bring to the table. I always found it interesting when people put hobbies on their resume, or if they had some sort of volunteer and hobby section, so I could get to know them a little bit personally. LinkedIn is also a great place to do that if you do not have space on your resume. Excellent. So we're moving into writing a resume. And what you'll see here is this is actually a different version of my resume. This is a newer or older version of my resume where I did have the date because I was not finished with my MBA yet. So you will all have expected graduation from the BBA program at Point Loma. You will put your Point Loma education at the top. And so your most recent education goes at the top. Then if you have an associate's degree, it goes below that. You do not need to include high school. Anything in high school does not need to be included unless it's absolutely exceptional. You had a really high leadership role, or you did something super special you want to include, but you don't need to put the high school that you attended. I opted to have an objective section here. This is totally optional. I do find as a hiring manager that this is a little repetitive because sometimes it is very clear that somebody wants the job that they applied for and they don't need to put it on their resume. However, in this situation, and some of you may find yourself in this situation, I did not meet a page for my resume yet. So I needed to fill space, and I used the objective section as a way to fill space. So if you need to fill space, an objective is a great way to do that. And then I highlighted some key skills for myself underneath. So you will have to have the education section. An experience section is absolutely critical, and that is the main chunk of the resume that we are going to dig into here. I will let you know too that you are going to submit a rough draft for peer review on your resume. And so it doesn't need to be perfect. You're going to be able to make some adjustments before you submit this to me. And then you also, if you do not get an A on the assignment, you will resubmit the resume before you do your mock interview at the final week of class, because I want to make sure these resumes are perfect. Like I said, you won't need to go back and do it again. We want to give you the skills to be able to apply for a job confidently and be thrilled about the work that you put out there. I am so glad that I can go back to 2012, 2013 and be able to find a resume that I'm still proud of. And that's because when I was in your shoes, I took this exact class at Point Loma. So I knew how to build my resume well, and that's what I want to equip you all with as well. Okay. So let's talk about action verbs. This is where your resume really can stand out beyond the organization and the way you write and the way you structure, colors, design. Your content in your experience section is absolutely critical. So spend time on wording of your job responsibilities. You can see the guidelines and examples for ideas in your packet or on Canvas with the past student examples. Examples for this are also in the back of your packet in Appendix A, B, and C. And then this will also help you understand when you use certain tenses. So if you are currently employed in a job, you'll notice this first job up here, commercial account executive, December 2021 to present. I am currently employed in this job. These verbs, managing, and I have kind of highlights at the bottom here, but managing is a currently active verb. It is, I am actively doing this today. Versus, if you go down to the next section, managed, built, hired, increased, moved. These are all past tense. Past tense for past jobs because you previously did these skills. I want to highlight a few things in here as well. Your resume will always stand out if you use numbers effectively. So this first box that's highlighted up here, if you're in any sort of a sales role or any sort of a goal-oriented role, you should always put your attainment. So how did you do performance-wise if you are in a performance-based role? Second box is in a role where I was not necessarily held to a certain attainment, and so I wanted to highlight something else that I did in addition to that. And so I used numbers to highlight the impact to the business. So for example, I said I managed 90 plus accounts and I facilitated upsell and I told them what my annual recurring revenue was. So there's a lot of acronyms on my resume here that may not make sense, but they make sense in the tech sales space. So I'm speaking to the audience that I am applying for a job with, and I'm speaking in a language that we all understand. So for example, if you are wanting to go into HR or you're wanting to go into marketing, you want to highlight things that are important to those departments and that industry in particular. So think about the industry as well as the department as you are crafting this resume. And if you're not sure, just highlight what you've done really well, because you can always spin success to whatever industry and role that you need. All right, so some overall rules of thumb to remind you of. 1 page only. Each bullet should be a work of art. So an example that I've seen is I had a student one time that said, I worked at a camp. That is not enough detail on your resume. That does not explain to somebody what you did, the business impact that you made, or how you made a contribution to the overall organization. So we reworked the sentence, and what we ended up with was taught over 400 boys ages 7 through 18 basic basketball skills. And what that did was it put it put a number to the amount of impact that he made on that basketball camp. So he had 50 kids over 8 weeks. We did a little math, that's 400. And he let the reader know that he taught basic basketball skills for a certain age group. So now they know he has skills to work with students or boys and people in a basketball capacity between those ages. So make sure you are utilizing really robust sentences. Don't just leave it at worked at camp. Build it longer, make it a work of art. Don't use the same verb over and over again. That's kind of an easy one. If you look at a resume and you see it's the same verb at the top every single time, that just shows lack of creativity, lack of attention, lack of time spent on your resume. So mix up your verbs a little bit. As I said again, include numbers. And then, as I said in the beginning, always save as a PDF so that the spacing doesn't get thrown off and the design doesn't get thrown off, and you know that what they're seeing on the reader's end is exactly what you intended them to see on your side as well. Okay, writing a cover letter. So we talked about the resume. Let's talk about the cover letter. What you are going to do is start by locating a job description. So you're going to locate a job posting, maybe on careerbuilder.com or monster.com or at Point Loma through OSV. It's an official job posting that will help guide your cover letter. You can look on LinkedIn for these. Having a job posting is going to help you tailor your cover letter to the job posting. And so you always want your cover letter to be tailored to what the job posting is asking for. So Appendix X in your packet on page 17 will give you a breakdown of a cover letter. And I want to point out again, it is the exact same letterhead across from my resume to my cover letter. And you will also see it is on my reference pages as well. Consistent branding. Keep the same heading you have on all 3 pages. I will always call that out. That is where most students lose points. Don't fall into that this semester. So let's talk about the paragraphs. A traditional cover letter is what you'll see in your packet on page 17, and you'll see that there is a date, there is an address, there is the name of the person that you're writing to with the company name as well. This is traditional and formal. There is no harm in going traditional and formal, and that is actually what I'm expecting you to do in your submission of your assignment this semester. So please take a formal approach, because being over-prepared and more formal is better than being under-prepared and informal. In this case, I actually knew the person that I was writing the letter to, so I kept it a little bit more simple. But wanted you to see it's going to be single spacing in the paragraphs, double space between the paragraphs. You're going to want to have 3 to 4 paragraphs. The first being an introduction, where you're going to talk about what you're going to cover. So you're going to boomerang back to the job posting in your introduction. Point out key phrases that they mentioned in that job posting that you will fulfill for them. So for an example, I'm willing to work hard as a team player, and I will flourish in high-powered, high-energy companies. That's directly from a job posting. Now they see, as the reader, that you understand and you know what they're looking for, and you can fulfill that for them. Also, in the introduction paragraph, you can state where you found the job posting. I found your posting on LinkedIn. What you want to always have is some sort of a teaser or a thesis, if you will, to what the rest of your letter is going to entail. So this can highlight typically 2 skills or strengths that you want them to understand. So due to my education and customer service experience, I feel I would be a great candidate. This tells the reader where you're going with the letter for the next 2 paragraphs. In the body paragraphs, you'll explain those 2 skills and strengths that you can expand upon. Paragraph 3 is going to be that second skill, whereas paragraph 2 is going to be the first skill. And then your final paragraph is where you're going to summarize. So summarize what you've highlighted, summarize why you're a great fit for the role, and then give them an opportunity to reach out to you. So include your phone number, let them know that you'll reach out if you haven't heard back in a certain amount of time. So it's always good to say, please reach me at, my cell phone number is, XYZ. If I don't hear back from you, I'll check in 2 weeks to see if we can align to find a time to talk. This gives you the opportunity to follow up. And I will tell you, as a hiring manager, 90, maybe even 95% of the applicants do not follow up. So if you really want the job, my hot tip is that you should absolutely call the company and check in on your application. You're probably going to get moved to the HR team, to a recruiter that's working on the job, but that shows you're hungry and that you're interested in the role. So I absolutely recommend it. Or even better, in today's world, I think it's appropriate to reach out to somebody from the company on LinkedIn. Let them know that you applied, ask if you can hear about their experience, let them know you're excited about the position. If you can find the hiring manager on LinkedIn, that's like gold. If you could find the recruiter on LinkedIn, that's great too. But if you can only find somebody who works at the company, it's good to just get your name in the door. So that's a really creative way to let people know that you're interested in the role. Okay. Now we're getting into a reference page. Reference page is the easiest of the 3 because all you're doing is relaying other people's information. I always withhold and do not share my reference page with a company that I apply with until they ask for it. I think that that's kind of the standard nowadays. They'll ask if they want references. If it asks for it in the application, obviously include it, but make sure it's a separate page so that you can submit just your resume or just your resume and cover letter without the references if you need to. So if you're not sure who to start with to ask if there'll be a reference, we recommend coaches, employers, former employers, current employers, maybe your professors or an academic advisor. Those folks know you well and can always speak to the quality of your work and your work ethic. So 2 things you need to do before you put their name on your reference page. You need to ask if you can include them on your reference page. Let them know that you want to include their email and their phone number. That's pretty much the only information that you really need to share of theirs. You're going to share their job title as well. And on page 18 of your packet, you'll see an example. And again, we're using the same letterhead. It's highlighted here for you. So it is consistent across all of your 3 pieces of paper on your application. And then secondly, you're going to give this person a heads up, or these 3 people a heads up when you apply or share this reference page with a company. Let them know that you shared this with, X company and they may be following up. I actually just had a former employee call me 2 weeks ago to say, hey, can I add you? I'm trying to go back to grad school. Can I add you as a reference? I said, absolutely. And then 2 days later, he said, hey, I've submitted that to the company and they're going to be reaching out to you. And sure enough, an hour later, I had an email and I had to go in and highlight some skills that he wanted me to share. So always prep your references so that they're saying what you want them to say and that, they know that the call's coming or the email's coming when they're asking for their input on you. Here's an example. You're just going to highlight the person, their title, maybe the company they work for. And then I like to put the relationship at the bottom so that people know who the person is that I'm referring them to. And the bottom person, Isabella, I added her because she was an employee of mine. So I was interviewing for a management role and I wanted them to be able to talk to somebody who had reported up to me. So if you are in a management role or seeking a management role, that may be kind of fun to add on there as well. All you need is 3 for this assignment. I think 3 is appropriate and perfect. If you want to have 4, that's okay, but don't go crazy. You don't need more than 3 or 4. All right. So here's what you're going to be submitting: a cover letter that is tailored to a job, a resume that is only 1 page, and a reference page. So your reference page, cover letter, and resume are all going to have the same heading. I hope you all said it with me in unison as you were watching this. Make sure your branding is consistent. Make sure there are no spelling errors. Make sure the formatting is correct. Don't have lines that are going on multiple parts of the page. If you need help organizing and formatting, reach out to me. I'm happy to show you how to save your document as a PDF or how to organize your layout and the formatting. That's super important to understand so that you can nail this every time that you're applying for a job. You are going to submit your rough draft for peer review, and then finally you're going to submit a final submission to me. And for those of you who are wondering, yes, I can see what your peer reviewers write about your resume, and I also can see whether you made the changes or not. So highly recommend use this final submission with me as if you're applying for a job. See if you really would get the job and if you pass, because we want to take this really seriously so that you have, like I said, a perfect packet of documents to share when you're ready to apply. All right, if you have any questions, add a comment on the video below or send me a message. Like I said, happy to help. Want to make sure you get this perfect so that you can get the job every time.